Hi, this is Bill Hartzer. This is the Bill Hartzer podcast for September 12th, 2019. I have today Blake Denman from Rickety Roo, and we're talking a little bit about local SEO. So, Blake, tell me a little bit about yourself and your background and how you got started in SEO.
Sure. So my name is Blake Denman. I'm the president and founder of Rickety Roo Inc. We are a local SEO agency based in Bend, Oregon. I started Rickety Roo in February of 2009, and how I got my start into local search was transitioning from one industry to another as a housing crash started happening in 2007, and I took a job doing data entry because I could type fast, and it happened to be a telemarketing company that sold local SEO. Sorry if you were ever contacted by my former employer. Anyways, and worked there for 2 years before I started my company.
Yeah. So, what's the difference between would you say working for an agency and actually starting your own agency and I know I've gone through that process because I've gone full circle because I worked in-house and for a while, and then I moved to the agency world, and then I ran an agency for a while, and then about 3 years ago went out on my own and started kind of my own agency. So but what would you say is the biggest difference, for people who are thinking about going out on their own or starting their own agency? What's the biggest difference between working for somebody at an agency, or actually and actually working for yourself?
Perception versus reality. When I was
Yeah.
getting ready to start my company, I thought that I was going to work, like a 4-hour work week, thanks to Tim Ferriss, and I was going to travel and do whatever I wanted, and I was going to make more money, and it was going to be rainbows and sunshine for the rest of my life. And when I actually started getting into running and operating a business, there was so much more work involved that I had never even considered. And going on vacation, I thought I would be able to unplug, and the only time I've been able to unplug completely was on my honeymoon 3 years ago.
Oh, yeah. Well, the only way I've actually been able to unplug is when our power went out, and so we didn't have any internet, and my phone was kind of low. Just randomly this summer, our power went out for 6 or 8 hours during the day, and I was so I was starting to think about firing up the generator to keep the food in the fridge cold, but in the refrigerator. But yeah, so it actually is a lot different. I mean, it's I've learned myself to get a lot more organized, and especially there's the yeah, I mean, you actually are able to make decisions and do things, and if I have the luxury, if I want to stop for an hour and do something else, or go outside for a while, I can do that as long as I don't have any calls scheduled and so forth. But I find that I'm being organized, and sure, I can do the SEO stuff that I want to, but at the same time, there is that business owner part of it, and it comes, so certainly in the U.S. you have, tax obligations, and you got accounting obligations, and kind of keep organized on that part of it. So that's a big, big, big difference between, being working for somebody else and just expecting that paycheck, every 2 weeks, or the direct deposit versus having to deal with clients and some that honestly they don't pay all the time, and so sometimes you have to deal with those types of issues. But so there definitely is a difference between working for yourself or even starting your own agency. But what's helped me though is actually getting having very specific processes. If it's an expense, and I actually get the receipt and record it. Record it where I need to record it on in my accounting software, but then I also record it. Actually have a folder, file folder, and so forth. And so that's like a procedure and a process. The same thing with processes and procedures. There's a lot of things that we kind of take for granted as far as when we're working for an agency versus, working for, actually just having to teach somebody how to do something, like, how to get certain links, or how, or so those processes. You mentioned when we were talking earlier, you mentioned to me that, you are transitioning from having things written down to actually doing a video. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, actually, I got the idea some time ago from another agency friend where he actually migrated all of his processes and procedures from text-based to video, and it made a lot of sense to me from multiple standpoints. It's actually a lot easier, in my opinion, to make a video process that has you, and I think you would be using Soapbox to make this happen, and then also have a screen recording, just so if you have an employee who's going through and learning how to do a competitive analysis, and you're able to kind of show off some of the nuances, or show like how sometimes it can be frustrating, where they're going to be able to see, okay, it's not always going to be very easy. There's going to be a lot of difficulties with some of these processes, but also be able to explain how, when, as the example, if you're doing a competitive analysis, like, just because your competitor has a link doesn't mean you should go get it too. Like, you have no idea what they've done with their link profile, and kind of, being able to share that in a video where it's going to be, I think, taken in better than just glazing over text.
Yeah, definitely, because there's definitely something that to be said about, being able to record, even if it's actually just an audio recording, but definitely a video, and essentially, because everything is done online, that, now that actually even, even including like a screen share video, or, like that type of thing, that actually show somebody. The only drawback is obviously things change, and so if you have something text-based instructions and something's changed a little bit, then you can actually just maybe update the instructions rather than having to actually go through and record another video. But that said, there's definitely processes and procedures are really good, and they can help you be very efficient. I think that one of the other drawbacks is that we are in marketing, and so, as you said, there are certain types of links or certain types of ways of doing things that are not necessarily it can't be templated for everybody. When I'm doing an SEO audit of a website, I do have my own template, and I use a template to begin when I do an audit, and I have a Microsoft Word document that I go through and make sure I cover everything. But then, that particular SEO audit or that particular document that I'm doing is completely completely customized to that particular client. And so that's how it that's, I guess, the plus side of working in marketing is, and essentially doing SEO, is that it's there's not necessarily a rule book or a template for everything, whereas in some industries like insurance or legal industry, there's rules and regulations, and you can pretty much have a rule book, right? So
Absolutely. Yeah.
And
I think it's
same thing
more
with
of,
Google. We do have the Google Webmaster Guidelines, and Google, like Google, Google Local, and there are some guidelines, but like I said, it's not very, they're not, a lot of it is thinking out of the box.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I like to think of our policies and procedures as living documents that, as things change, we just naturally update them. But a lot of the core processes I talk about that we use, they don't really change very much or very often. But if they do need to be changed, then we change them.
Sure. So let's talk a little bit about local SEO and what is, what when you onboard a client or have a new client, come on, if they're a roofer or a plumber or local business, what are kind of some of the things that you look at or kind of analyze right at the beginning, to kind of get everything started? Or, are there is there anything that first do very specifically that for each local client?
Yeah, first would be making sure we get all the right logins to their Google Analytics, Search Console, and access to their Google My Business listing. And then the first actual hands-on work that we want to do is completely optimize their entire Google My Business profile, from business name, address, phone number, to making sure that the right categories are picked and that the correct category is the primary category. And then, kind of feeding Q&A features a little bit after, once we kind of get some information from the client, and then making sure there's great photos and if they have them, video on that listing as well.
Sure. So photos and videos, how often do you recommend, uploading those? I mean, are they kind of a ranking factor, or, do those help views, in your opinion?
They definitely can. To what extent, I don't think anybody really has a clear idea, and how often. It really depends. Like if you're in, I guess it depends on what type of industry you're in. If you're in the service industry and you interact with a lot of people and you do before and after photos of your work, then I don't see a problem with uploading those every single day, as long as you have permission from your client to do so. If there's any personal, if it's let's say it's a windshield repair person, or if it's a house cleaner. Yeah, we don't really stick to like, okay, we need to add this X amount of photos or videos per week. It just, whenever we get them, we want to make sure that they're added.
Sure.
And then with how photos can also help rank, I have an example. It likely works in other locations too. If you do a search on Google for dog-friendly places, Bend is a pretty dog-friendly place. The 3 results that show up in the map pack, you'll see reviews that contain dog-friendly showed up under that result as well. And then if you look at the photos that are chosen for that Google My Business listing, they're all pictures of a dog. They are not the primary photo for that listing. It's not the cover photo. It's not the logo. And all 3 locations that show up are restaurants. So that could be an indicator that photos can help too.
Sure. So I have I've done, some kind of random testing myself whereas I have a client or a couple of clients that are restaurants, and they upload, one employee is responsible for going out and, taking a couple photos each day, and, inside and outside. And that, seems to really help. They have different specials each day and of the week. So like, for example, they'll have, one particular, special. It might be, a certain combo of, maybe a fish, or with a certain, type of potato, or something like that. So they'll take a photo of that special, and they'll post it on the Google My Business, and they'll upload it to their Facebook page, and they'll, and those types of things, and So that seems to be helping where they weren't really doing that at all before, but the number of
Hmm.
views that they continue are that are reported, and they definitely are doing so much better than uh, and the review, the amount of reviews they continue to get and so forth, is so much better than their competitors in the area. So that's one, area. I mean, so there's certain, I can imagine there are certain types of businesses that, where it would be fairly easy or easier to do that. Like obviously, if it's a restaurant and they have a daily special every day, you know, posting that special on their Facebook page and on their Google My Business listing, would be appropriate. But
Yeah,
others that go ahead.
let's say, are they also posting that as a Google post as a special too?
Yes, yes, they're
Okay.
when they can do that, and yes, when they remember, but most of the time they do. This particular employee, I've shown them how to do it, and they have the app on their phone, and so that's their kind of when they come in and they find out the special, they take a photo, they upload it, and they make a post. They post it on a Facebook page, post it on Twitter, and on Instagram. So it seems to be working very well for them.
That's great. You see, like there isn't much work involved in that, but if it helps, then yeah, keep going.
Well, I find with a restaurant in particular, it's one, in this case, it's one particular waitress that, when she first gets in the kind of afternoon, it's kind of slow, and so she's figured that's kind of what her thing is. She does is when she gets there, and there's not, it's not typically busy, and so that's, just she's gotten in the habit of doing that, and it seems like it actually really is does help. So, are there any other tips or tricks or anything that you can offer that we may not have thought of? Certainly we want to get all of our optimize the listing and so forth. One thing that one kind of, I don't know if it's a trick or a tip, but one of the things that I have come across is the fact that if a and I don't know if you've heard about this or not, but what I'll offer is that the fact that Google remembers the name of a business. So if you were to, if for example my particular business, it would be an example would be, at one time it was Bill Hartzer LLC, and I changed it to Hartzer Consulting LLC. And I have the same listing, but I legally changed it, and so I needed to change the name. So any searches, for my name or the previous business name, would show the current business name.
Hmm.
Well, if you take that a little bit, if you want to kind of be more look at it with more of a black hat side, if somebody were to go in and, add a keyword, for example, if it's, if it's, if I wanted to get, SEO consulting in as a keyword into my name, I could make it, Hartzer SEO consulting and change that. And then maybe a few days later, or a couple hours later, I change it back to Hartzer consulting. Google will, as I understand, Google will actually remember that at one point in time, SEO consulting as a keyword was in the name of the business. So they remember that. And so SEO consult later on, SEO consulting as a keyword, that might cause that business to show up, even though it's a previous name of the business, right? And so what I've seen people do in the past is temporarily change names, to get keywords in there, and then they were then changed back to the legal name of the business. And have you ever seen that happen before?
Normally, when we see that happen, it's usually the company in question or the agency that they hired put in those keywords with the intention of getting the
Yep.
rank value from them, which they absolutely do in maps, and it's horrible, and we hope it goes away. But here's to hoping,
Yep.
right? But most of the time, usually that will revert back to what the legal business name is, either by edits from Google Local Guides, or it was escalated via the redressal form, or there's a couple other ways too. Joy Hawking just published something. I think it was yesterday or the day before. It was this week, where if you see updates happening to your Google My Business listing, there's different types of updates that happen, and there's a couple I mentioned, but there's also what you talked about earlier. The Google has access to a ton of information, right? They have access to databases, IRS information, credit card transactions, you name it, they probably have access to it. So if they have access to the corporate registration for a business name, and they see that it's this compared to what's published, and there's no DBA filed or no in Oregon they call it ABN, Associated Business Name, then they will likely revert it back to what they believe is more accurate. But I've never heard like someone creating a DBA or an ABN temporarily to get the ranking lift and then reverting back. Normally if they do that, then they do that because they're going to stick with that DBA, even though the main property still stays the same, but they created the DBA for the keywords.
Yes, and that kind of brings up another thing is I just as a local guide, I mean it's taken me close to 3 years basically to get to a level 10 at local guide, and so and I go in and every so often, if I have free time, I'll be sitting on my phone. I'll go into Google Maps and I'll basically start cleaning up listings, and I see all sorts of different categories that in various categories from, not just SEO agencies, but, from roofing to plumbers to all sorts of different, kind of certain categories that I'll do searches, and if I see a listing that has, keyword stuffed listing, in the name, I definitely go in and change and update it to what I think is the right name. And I think that that one of the things I see all the time is that a lot of listings, even people who I most likely are not doing any SEO, but they know that the title of a local Google My Business listing, the title of the business is key, and so they'll stuff keywords in there, and they will stuff the city name, for example, and that's one of the easiest ones to spot. That they'll the city name next to a business, and that'll be an easy edit to do. But I was fairly recently made aware of the fact that Google does remember the previous history of what that business was named in the Google My Business listing, so that can actually have an effect.
Huh. Yeah, I'll have to create some testing around that to see if that actually works or not, because that's interesting.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept. I mean, it makes sense because companies do, like, I mean, legitimately, I had an LLC, which is Bill Hartzer LLC, and I did change it to I changed the brand to Hartzer Consulting, and so that's it would make sense for Google to have the previous name, and because if somebody knew Bill Hartzer LLC and they searched for that, they would want to find the current name, their current business, even though they've changed the name slightly. So it makes sense for that. I think that there's, unfortunately, there's people who will take, who have learned that and they've taken advantage of that, and they may stuff some keywords in there and find that Google does remember those types of things.
Yeah, I'm just
So
more
there's also
interested if,
different hacks like that.
yeah, I was gonna say, like, I'm more interested if, like, the way that, you have your original LLC and then you updated it to what it currently is. I can see that absolutely happening with Google My Business, where, because separate entities, like your original LLC still exists, but you have a DBA. But I'm more curious
Yep.
if none of that exists and it's just a spam listing that's not registered as an LLC or a corporation or a sole proprietorship. There's no business license information. There's no other third-party trusted data to back that up. I wonder if that still helps or not.
Yeah, so that's where somebody would just go in and add a keyword, and like for example, if it's a digital marketing agency, Hartzer Media, for example, and they add the keyword web design or web designer to it, and then after a few days they remove web design and change it back to just the name of their business. Then whether or not they would continue to potentially rank, for you know uh, uh, for web design, even though the keyword's not there in the title. I've seen where that can actually be that has happened, and I've done some a little testing around that. But I do know that Google does, in fact, keep the name of the they remember the name or the previous names of that business.
Yeah, now while I'm talking to you, I'm gonna see if this actually. I used to have an emoji in my Google My Business name,
Yep.
and I'm wondering, and I removed it. I'm wondering if I do
Yeah. So in
search
theory, you
for
actually should still show up for that. Yes.
if I just do a search by emoji, which there's that's a whole separate issue.
But if you did a search for, I would emoji, that emoji, and Bend, Oregon, or your city name, you imagine you may show up for it if there's a city name associated with it. If they can see it as a local, as a local business or a
All
local
right, so
search
I'm doing
query.
a search, and if I go to maps, rocket ship, Bend, Oregon, no results found. But I mean, that's a very disambiguated search. So interesting. Maybe I'll have to tinker with that a little bit more.
Yeah, and that they may have changed. Yeah, it might not. It may or may not be appropriate with emojis. I'm not sure. And that and obviously the last time I had checked on this or tested it was 3 to 6 months ago. So it may have changed.
Hmm.
So let's kind of. I guess we only have a few minutes left here. So tell me a little bit about how to get in touch with you, and if they're wanting needs a local SEO expert to hire, then and they can definitely get in touch with you. So how do we get in touch?
Sure. So I'm on Twitter at Blake Denman. Um, my DMs are open, and my website is ricketyroo.com, spelled RICKETYROO.com. And if you're listening to this and you are really wanting to focus on one thing that's really going to help you with localized or map results, I would have to say that reviews are going to be the biggest helper in your map results efforts. Doesn't matter how great your on-site SEO or your link building profile is, you cannot outrank a horrible reputation.
All right, that's great to know. So, and you need to respond as a business owner. You need to respond to reviews if you can, and that is also important as well.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
thanks.
Respond to all reviews, and if it's a negative review, yeah, you're gonna want to be defensive. But just remember that everybody that views your listing can read your response. So tread lightly.
All right, thanks again for joining me this afternoon, and um, just remember, it's coming up. The State of Search Conference is November 4th and 5th this year, in Dallas, and I know that you'll be talking about local SEO. So I'm looking forward to seeing you in person. So this will be great.
Sounds
Thanks
good.
again,
Yeah,
Blake.
thanks for having me.
Okay, thanks, Blake.